Hey everyone, I'm Kian. Welcome to our discussion on technology and AI.
Currently, AI is showing up in classrooms, hospitals, and childhood education. The overall question is, how are we able to regulate this technology effectively and safely, especially when it's evolving faster than our policies, institutions, or public understanding?
And it's not just about the tech, it's about the system around it. Who's getting access, who's being protected, and what are the laws and ethical frameworks available to make sure AI helps rather than harms.
We each took a different subtopic and looked at different angles. Amelia's covering the history and fear around AI in healthcare and society. Carla's diving into policy and regulation. I'm exploring the ethical and theoretical frameworks, and Kia's breaking down how media shapes public perception.
So if you've ever wondered how AI is changing the way we learn, care, and connect, or how we can make sure it's done responsibly, sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode.
When I looked into the history of AI in healthcare, I realized the story goes back further than most people think. The idea of machines showing intelligent behavior isn't new at all. Herod of Alexandria, way back in the 1st century, built steam-powered devices that mimicked human actions. They weren't diagnosing diseases, but they planted the seed for what we now call artificial intelligence. Jump back to the 20th century, and AI starts to take shape as a field. By the 1970s, programs like MYCIN were helping doctors diagnose infections. They weren't widely adopted, but they proved that machines could support clinical reasoning. From there, AI kept evolving. By the 2000s, it was analyzing medical images, predicting patient risks, and streamlining hospital workflows.
There's current examples of exactly what she just talked about, where during COVID we had a lot to do with telemedicine, and if people aren't in hospitals, they had to come up with a new way to bring the hospital to them. Pretty self-explanatory, but that's where we started to see really the big talks surrounding how can we protect people and their information and make sure that everybody has the correct training when it comes to doctors, nurses, and just the people at home. Do they know how to use these platforms, and do they know how to identify, is this where I should be sharing my information, or could this be a potential scam?
But here's the catch. While the technology kept advancing, education and regulation didn't keep up. My research showed that schools often became testing grounds for AI tools. Without strong ethical guidelines, Daniel Schiff points out that national AI policies tend to focus on using education to test AI rather than educating people about AI. That means students are sometimes treated like test subjects. Like the bigger questions, like how to teach ethical use or how to explain AI clearly to the public, get ignored. Other countries like Kenya and India have taken a different approach. Instead of just testing tools, they've built policies that emphasize the quality of education and the ethical side of AI. They care less about how much data can be collected, but more whether students actually understand what's happening. That contrast highlights a big gap in the US. We don't have consistent education regulations that require doctors, nurses, or even patients to be taught how AI works. And that gap matters, because whether it's in a classroom or hospital, if people don't understand AI or don't even know it's being used, it creates mistrust. So before we get into cool examples of AI in healthcare today, we need to recognize that the history of AI isn't just about the machines, it's about how society has or hasn't educated people to use them responsibly.
Going back to what I had said about telemedicine, Amelia kind of began to touch on it in schools, where when it comes to the telemedicine, it exposed a lot of gaps in consent and privacy as it pertains to regulation, because the patients were forced to accept these vague, very much use it or don't items to get essential care that they needed. One of the really big examples was Babylon Health. They were super efficient, but they were oftentimes collecting a lot of data from their patients with very minimal oversight. And this goes into the entire argument of why we need stricter regulations, but like Amelia mentioned, they have to be fluid due to the product nature. And it creates a really big issue with regulating AI, because in all the current attempts that we have, AI develops so quickly, it outpaces the development of the regulations. So before they can even be effective, they're already out of date. So it brings into the question, would it be more reasonable to regulate the speed of developing AI so that once that's done, it's more attainable and effective at regulating the content? But when you bring in these more complicated type of regulations, it then creates a bigger risk of creating loopholes that people and companies can exploit. Bringing in companies, it shows one of the biggest issues with regulating any product is driven by like political and corporate interests. And AI is the biggest example of this. If you look back to the 60s where we had the space race, that's exactly what AI is now. Except instead of the US and the Soviets, it's more like the US, Europe, China. They're all just competing to see who can make the better product and faster.
Going deeper into what Carla said, I looked at how AI affects autonomy and identity. Manuel Castells talks about how the network society tech that connects us but also leaves people out. That digital divide affects who gets opportunities and who doesn't. A good example in AI is hiring. Algorithms are used to screen resumes, but they often reflect the biases of their own creators. That means people from marginalized backgrounds can be excluded without even knowing it. I think we need ethical frameworks that goes beyond just fairness, which Renee Hobbs and Tamara Sobel argue that media literacy is a form of empowerment. If people understand how AI works, they can better protect their autonomy. Some say AI is just a tool. It doesn't shape identity, but I disagree. When AI decides who gets a job, what you see online, or how you get treated in a hospital, it absolutely affects how you see yourself. That's why ethics and education have to be part of the conversation. That also goes into saying about how we use AI, because in the way we look at things, we can't just trust everything that we get from AI. In a way, we have to do our own research to double check and double fact everything that we are told, because AI in its own way is not perfect. It's far from perfect, actually. If you look at the way it writes, types, and where it gets the information from, not everything it's fact. So we all have to do our own work to double check that.
I looked at how AI is portrayed in media. In healthcare, news articles often frame AI as efficient but risky, like, "Ooh, robot doctor, but will it kill me?" On social media, it's super polarized. Some posts glamorize AI as a miracle tool, others warn about surveillance and bias. One example is the media coverage of ChatGPT. Some headlines call it revolutionary for students, others say it's the end of learning. That kind of split messaging creates confusion and fear. I think media literacy is key. If people can critically analyze what they're seeing, they're less likely to fall for hype or panic. That's especially important for older generations who didn't grow up with this tech. The counter argument that media panic is overblown, that people will adapt, but public perception drives policy. If people are scared, they'll demand strict laws, even if those laws aren't effective. So we need to shape the narrative with facts, not fear. This also connects to the idea of presentation in media. When I saw across all research reports I did, each article showed how the way something is presented can totally change how people understand it. In the study about multimedia presentations, students learn better when information is shown clearly and in a modern way. That shows how important good presentation is. With AI, the media often does the opposite. They make it look scary or more exciting than it really is, which leads to misunderstandings. The articles about social media presentation also relate. People online only show a certain version of themselves, and the media does the same thing with AI. They pick the most dramatic angle because that's what gets the most attention, even if it isn't the full story. The research on VR showed that realistic presentation makes people believe something more. The same goes for AI stories. If the visuals or headlines look intense, people will react strongly, even if the real situation is normal. And the study on eye strain and screen design reminded me that even small details in media, like colors, lighting, and layout, change how people feel. The media uses these details in AI stories too. A dark, glitchy graphic makes AI seem dangerous. A clean and bright design makes it seem friendly. The research on influencers also fits because influencers gain trust based on how they present themselves. The media does it with AI too. The stories that look the most authentic or exciting get pushed the most, even if they leave out important details. So overall, my research shows that presentation really matters, and the way AI is presented in the media has a huge effect on how people think about it. That's why we need a clear explanation and less exaggeration so people can understand AI for what it actually is and not just how it looks in headlines. So here's a question we've been wrestling. Conventional wisdom says AI needs firmer laws and regulations. But what if that's not the best approach? What if AI actually needs more fluid structures because it's constantly evolving?
I'm definitely in favor of stricter regulation because without clear boundaries, especially in places like healthcare and education, people can very easily be exploited or misled. The biggest issue is that, like I said, it just doesn't move fast enough to regulate. So by the time we've passed a law on some aspect of content regulation on AI, it's already been outpaced. Like I said, that's why maybe we should introduce the idea of regulating the development of the product as opposed to the content first.
You make some good points, but I feel like with the way how fast AI moves, wouldn't you want more fluid frameworks? Because like I learned in my research, rigid policies often fail because by the time you create the policy, you pass through all the approvals that it needs. AI is already onto the next form. Onto its next form. AI isn't static, so it adapts to its environment. So I feel like the regulations that we create, it has to also be able to adapt to AI.
Part of why I argue about regulating the development, because if we limit how quickly it can grow and change, then it gives us more time and sort of understand exactly how fluid we need those regulations to be and understand better what kind of content is it being used for the most, what harmful content are we seeing the most. You get my point.
Yeah, it definitely depends on what you're using AI for. I get that.
Like, personally, I think both of you guys are right, but just in different ways. Carla's point about needing protection is huge, especially for vulnerable groups, but Amelia's right in the aspect that static laws can't keep up. Maybe the answer is layered between governance, some firm guardrails, but also adaptive oversight.
Yeah, like that just brings me back to my point that I mentioned earlier, is that if you could implement something like what you mentioned, it makes it difficult because most institutions, companies, whatever it may be, they don't move that quickly. And without any sort of strong enforcement, it brings me back to what I said before about it will create loopholes that can be exploited. And this like in one of my articles that I read during research, it brought up local AI regulations and how like products like ChatGPT and like Meta AI and things like that, they're very much open. They have stricter regulations. It's not anybody can access the code to it per se. So they're a lot easier to regulate, but things that are built into devices like how Windows computers come with like Cortana and Copilot built in, or your phones come with Siri, or there's like Google Home and Amazon Echoes, like those can all be accessed through the device by anybody. They can change the code, they can make it do whatever they want, and that's where a lot of issues with regulation comes from, is how do we regulate all types of AI, how do we regulate, like, there's just so many different issues. that arrive.
And especially public perception plays a role into this as well. If people don't trust AI, they will demand harder rules. But if we educate them and show them how AI works and what it can do responsibly, we might get a more thoughtful regulation.
No, yeah, I think that you brought up a good point. We need transparency because transparency really does bring trust. For example, in like healthcare, if patients maybe were given even a little bit of a tutorial, or not even a tutorial, they were taught about the tools that were being used in their bodies, I think that would really help bridge the gap of, people being less they trusted AI less and more. You guys get what I'm saying.
If we rely too heavily on education, though, it can create an even bigger gap than what we're seeing now, because this goes into a whole other systemic issue of access to these different kind of educations and different areas not having the same resources. So that just goes into a whole bigger debate of, should we even implement things like this because of the gaps that already exist? Could it widen them, or would it help? It's a weird debate.
Maybe the real challenge is building systems that can change without letting accountability slip. That means ethics, theory, and governance have to work together, not in silos. Ethics set the do not harm baseline. Theory helps us spot hidden risks and power gaps. Governance turns those ideas into clear rules, audits, and feedback loops. If we combine all three, we can adjust policies as tech evolves, measure real-world impact, and still keep a clear record of who is responsible when things go wrong.
Exactly. And media needs to support that too, by showing nuance, not just hyper panic. A lot of AI stories jump straight into the extreme, and that shapes how people feel before even they understand the basics. If the media showed more balanced examples, like both the benefits and the limits, people would have a clearer and fuller picture of what AI can actually do. With small changes in how AI is presented can help reduce fear and build trust, which leads to better public understanding and better decisions overall.
So to wrap it up, AI is powerful, but it's not neutral. In healthcare, trust and transparency are key, but not even just in healthcare. It's really just in any aspect of AI that you're using in your daily life. We need that trust and we need that transparency.
Really, in any sort of policy, we're extremely dependent on having regulations that both protect people while also not stifling any sort of innovation or breakthroughs that could occur for these products.
Ethically, we just have to think about autonomy, identity, and who gets to shape the future. It's not just about building smarter systems, it's about making sure people still have control over their choices and how they're represented. If AI decides what we see, how we're judged, or even what opportunities we get, it starts shaping our sense of self. So the real ethical question is, who has the power to design and direct those tools? And are they doing it in a way that respects everyone's dignity and freedom?
And in media, we need better literacy and more balanced narratives to help people understand what AI really is and is not. This means moving away from the extreme all good or all bad stories and giving people clear explanations. When the media shows AI in a more realistic way, it is easier for the public to understand the technology, ask better questions, not jump to conclusions. This kind of balanced presentation helps everyone see AI more accurately, and instead of reacting out of fear or hype.
Thank you for listening to our discussion today, and we hope that everything that we said sparked some sort of really deeper thinking and consideration about the things that we have going on in our life as it pertains to this type of technology that's becoming so prevalent